Well, I think we definitely do need something more global. It's not clear exactly what it is, but if you look at the predicament that we face around the world, the world is kind of splitting, faced with the complexity of real problems. Climate change would be a perfect example, but it's not the only example. Or massive poverty. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. It's a problem around the world. The split we see is those who don't think those problems either exist or they should exist, and we just go back to doing it the way we used to do it. So there's this tremendous tendency to pull back to the way it used to be. And of course, that's always supported by a lot of fear and a lot of anger. And it's dividing our societies around the world. And then the other side is, no, these are truly complex matters. We don't understand them. We'll never understand them. There's no right strategy. We just have to keep learning. We have to have more like the child's mind rather than the master expert's mind. So another way to say all this is, in the world of complexity, expertise becomes more and more a problem. You know, expecting our president to have the answers like an expert is naive. It's funny in a way because I think the wisdom traditions are very different than the expertise traditions. I tend to see a lot of the problems as being the increasing dysfunction of the cult of expertise. I have the answer. I will solve the problem for you. I'm the master. I'm the expert. And that becomes less and less tenable in a world of increasing complexity. But because there's so much fear, there's a natural tendency, you know, the old joke by the brain scientists, the brain downshifts under fear. You go to your most primitive types of fight, flight, or freeze. Okay? Literally the reptilian brainstem. And unfortunately now we're getting a lot of reptilian political activities. This is the answer. We got to stop. We got to freeze this. Go back to what it used to be. And you know, again, it's the emotions that are the key to understanding this. And they're the emotions of fear and anger, which always goes very close with fear. So yes, we do definitely need something different. I don't know what it looks like on a global basis. You might say it's really this emergence of networks of innovation, networks of imagination. And not surprisingly, I think you'll see it probably most strongly amongst the children and young people. That their predisposition is to be more exploratory, more open. They're less concerned about saving, protecting. They're more oriented towards creating. And that may be the real division in the world between the cult of expertise, and this is, of course, where hierarchy is still very powerful, versus, you might say, the spirit of learning and exploration. But it's becoming an increasingly evident divide. Protecting the past is not a good way of learning. Never was, never will be. But when their fear goes up, the tendency to become more and more protective of the past becomes stronger. And then, of course, that's wound together or connected with a lot of the deep global dynamics. I mean, this tendency for the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer is structurally embedded. Probably the best example of it is the evolution of the financial sector. Because if you look at it historically, banking or something like banking is historically a very important industry. And all it basically is doing is saying where there's some surplus of financial assets here and some deficit here, how do we connect the two? That's traditionally what banking does. The problem is, if you look at the financial sector today, it's not banking at all. It's a huge casino where the rich have a lot of money to gamble with and the rich get richer. The very idea that financial assets should produce increasing financial assets, I think, is a problematic idea. You see some traditional cultures where that was considered a problem, usury was considered a sin, right? The idea that the rich could get richer just because they're already rich is clearly, from a social or societal standpoint, very problematic, as opposed to people who have accumulated some level of financial assets should be able to use those or deploy those in a way that help others who don't have it. So I think that's a deep value now. And it's not surprising that you see it in our political world. You know, domination of small groups of very, very wealthy people whose main focus seems to be on how to get richer. It's a big problem in the world. So whether, you know, to me, that's the social parallel to climate change. People don't talk about it much this way, but climate destabilization is the rich creating a problem for the poor. Migration is the most obvious symptom of that. We have all this problem all around the world of this massive flood of migrants from the south to the north. Usually the most common cause of the migrations is climate destabilization. Floods, droughts, and the deterioration of traditional agricultural areas that are no longer viable. So we, the wealthy north, create the conditions for migration, then we put up bigger walls saying, well, we don't want you. But we're the ones who actually create the conditions. Climate destabilization is the kind of imperialization, it's the colonization of the 21st century. You know, it used to be colonization was exploiting the poor countries for resources. Now we basically exploit the poor countries to be the reservoir of our waste, like the destabilization of climate is basically created by the wealthy countries and imperialistically or colonially imported in poor countries. We just don't see that. We see it as just the symptoms of the problem. But that's why I think for so many years, you know, if you talk to children, young children, the two issues that sooner or later will eventually come out that they're real concerns, climate change and poverty. And the two are two sides of the same coin. And in the meantime, we're busy trying to protect the past. The picture just doesn't add up. It's increasingly going to destabilize the world. So yes, we do need to look at this as a global picture. And yes, we need networks that can address it. I think we're still unclear what those networks can be like. But I think they're emerging around the world now. The Presencing Network is a wonderful example. It's tens of thousands of people trying to work together on reinventing banking, for example. I really think there's a lot of potential in that.